Hi.
I think I froze there for a second.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I know. Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad you saw the freezing.
Yeah, I was like, what's happening? I like what's happening here
Me
with
too.
this looks red, but it's like orange and the black, and it's like Halloween. We're issuing in the please stop being 95 degrees.
Please. Oh my gosh. I feel like if I buy a pair of Uggs, it should be like Ugg season.
Yep.
And not.
Yeah. I always used to, I remember when I lived in Georgia, I would like want to go to the fall festival and just really embrace it. Flannel, jeans, boots. And I would just, it was too hot.
It was way too hot.
It was way too hot.
You know what? I am, now that this will be our first Christmas season, winter in Maryland, I'm looking forward to actually being cold on Christmas, like the holiday season.
Yeah. I hope it's cold enough for you. Because last year here in Richmond, it was not that cold.
Really?
Wow. Look how good we're doing at small talk.
We are. I even had something else queued up, but we didn't need it.
No, tell me.
Want to tell you what it is? Okay, I was going to tell you on Marco Polo, but this is a waterless diffuser, and I put lemon essential oils in it.
No, I need one.
And lemon actually creates like mental clarity and like all types of great, like, energy. And it actually works, or it's just my brain. But either way, it's working.
Can you get it on Amazon.com?
No, but I'll show you. It's Seasons is the company. I'll send it to you.
Okay. That's so funny that sounds amazing and I want it. And also, do they have other scents? I mean, I like lemon, but like, do they have several different
ones? Any. Yeah, you can use any essential oils that you want. It just
do they send you the essential oils, or you have to go buy them separately?
Both. Either one.
What I was going to tell you is that I finally found a water bottle that I love.
That is awesome. How big is that?
It's
what size is that?
A great size. I don't know.
Like a whole
24 ounce. 24 ounce.
That's great.
But what I like about, all those, have you seen those like Stanley mugs that they have now with the like, they're very big.
With the,
but what I like about them is that you can fit them in a cup holder. What I don't like about it is that it's a straw, and I don't like straws.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right?
I can see that. My coffee.
I don't want to be like, I want to like.
Yeah. Oh, right. When you're working out. Yeah. My coffee has a straw in it, but yeah, I actually love that. And I'm like kind of addicted to water bottles. All right.
You're what? You're addicted to what?
I'm addicted to water bottles. So.
Oh, Target.
Yep.
Anyways. Okay, we got the product placement out of the way. They should send us money for that. Right? Maybe if we had a bigger audience. If there was more than just my mom that listened to the podcast, they would want us. Okay. So many people. Right? Yes. So today we're talking about rejection. This is one we've been thinking about for a while. I know we had pitched this to each other a while back, and we were like, it's such an intense emotion. It brings just like so much like hurt and pain. And when you say the word rejection, I can feel the feeling that is associated with it. So we want to dig into it a little bit. How do people respond to it? How do we think about it? Et cetera, et cetera. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start with just maybe defining what are some like common like experiences that bring about rejection?
Yeah. I also am looking forward to this conversation because I feel like when we were talking about it, and my perception of rejection is that there's really nothing good that comes from rejection. But I think our conversation will turn toward what could be good about it. But we'll first talk about all the bad. So there are different types of rejection. There's romantic rejection. I think there's so many things that can happen within the context of a romantic relationship that can be perceived by any of the people, involved in the relationship as rejection. And, that could be the end of a relationship, but also, I think infidelity, I think also, things like, concepts and ideas and compromising on, how the relationship should go, roles and things like that can also really come about. Rejection can come about there. I think jobs, friendship rejection is a big one. Pregnancy loss, I think that's where, one of the major forms of rejection came, like, for me, around this feeling of rejection. I'm being rejected and wanting to be a mom, right? Like there's just like this deep sense of I can't belong in this group or, this experience. I think creative rejection is a big one when you like listen to the experiences of writers or artists and the amount of rejection that they experience over the course of their, career. There's just it's almost like you have to get used to rejection as a human being, but also, as a creative. Academic rejection, there's social rejection, financial rejection, wanting to buy a house. I mean, there's a great deal of rejection in like home ownership and, applying for loans and all that good stuff. And then I think rejection of ideas and rejection of assistance, especially as a helper, when you are constantly thinking about helping others, and then others, for one reason or another, rejecting that help, can be really hard.
Yeah. Those are, I mean, I have to tell you, when I was preparing for this, I was thinking about two forms of rejection. I was like, someone breaks up with you or you lose your job. And you like these ideas, I think as I was reading over them, I was like, yep. And there are so many different scenarios where people experience rejection. I particularly like the creative one idea. My mom's a writer, and thinking about like how many times that she has submitted an article that she put her like heart and soul into, her thoughts, her reflections, her experiences, and to have that kind of like rejected back, I think brings up a lot of other emotions. One of the other ones, as you were talking, I was thinking about was like people in like sales roles. I bet, people who are just, out there trying to sell a product or a service that they feel strongly about, that they've seen work for other people. And it's just like, no. Yeah,
I think therapists also experience rejection as well. I mean, throughout the course of a relationship. But I think like, there's so much, especially in certain markets, there's a lot of like saturation, like, in the Atlanta market, for example, there's a great deal of therapists. And now clients are, kind of coming and starting and saying like, I'm going to go to a consultation with you and I have 7 others lined up and I'm going to choose the best therapist for me. And I think that there are times where, we kind of get used to making sure that it's a good fit. And there can also be experiences of rejection when that feeling of good fit is one-sided.
It's a really good point to bring up the therapist piece too, because, definitely along determining fit, but then also say you've been working together for 2 years and the person just ghosts and stops coming, and I think that when I have had that experience before of wanting to stop seeing a therapist for whatever reason, it's like impossible, I feel like, to frame it in a way that is like, that doesn't like, make the person feel like it has something to do with what you're not getting from them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That is so hard. It actually just like resurfaced it, but I think that there are also ways, especially as we were talking about, this topic of like, taking it a little bit deeper. I'm really interested in your thoughts on, some of the common emotional reactions that people have when they face rejection.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the two that I'll focus on, like I mentioned earlier, are like personal rejection, from a perspective of like a significant other, but like also maybe friendship is there as well. And then professional rejection as well, what that looks like more in the workplace. So, I mean, I think that the biggest underlying emotion that a lot of people experience here is like, I don't want what you've offered, whether it's yourself in the context of a relationship, whether it's, your work or, what you're offering to somebody else, like that. I think the way that connects to your feelings of like self-worth, I think is what makes rejection so hard.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking about one of the forms of rejection I remember experiencing was with my high school boyfriend. We went to college together. I'm, 19 years old. I'm thinking this is the person I'm probably going to spend the rest of my life with. I'm young. I don't really know exactly what kind of life I want to have, but this is like my first like real romantic relationship. And after a couple of years, he broke up with me. And I remember thinking, this sounds maybe a little dramatic. I remember thinking it would have been easier for me emotionally if he would have tragically died than for him to like live and just not want to be with me, And
Yeah.
like, of course, I didn't want him to die or anything like that. But I mean, it's just that piece of like you're continuing to exist in the world, but you don't want me.
Yeah.
Like, it was really intense and tough, And I mean, looking back, this was like 20 years ago, but like now I can see it so much more clearly in the way of like, that there were a lot of other elements. There's always a lot of other elements in these situations, right? There's a lot of other there's a lot of other, reasons that people say no,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
the separating your feeling from that is very difficult. It's very
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. It's an ongoing struggle. And I think even like, as you were just talking about, like the deeply like, just it's such a hard experience that hits right to your feelings of self-worth. I
Mhm.
think that also makes it hard to say no to others, and it like just creates this like, people pleasing. It also creates like, if I'm in a relationship or in a friendship or in a situation that I need to say no to because it no longer serves me, I'm constantly thinking about not wanting to inflict that same sense of rejection, in that person, because I don't want them to feel like there's something wrong with them.
Yep. Yep. I mean,
Yeah.
it is so much more complex in this sense too, of like that there's a million other reasons. Like even thinking about that breakup with my ex-boyfriend, he saw his life going a different direction. I was like kind of the good girl, doing all the things in the right way, and he wanted to explore like what else is possible in life. Like that
Sure.
doesn't really have anything to do with me, but the way that it went right to me, and I,
Sure.
very similar to what you're saying too, impacted how I then like wanted to show up in the world, like the desire to put myself
Mhm.
back out there or to, be vulnerable and open myself up to a relationship again was hard for me because it's almost like you have that obviously like a bit of a trauma of, putting yourself out there once and it being rejected.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. I think
Yeah,
even like your point about like shame is really important too. Shame is like a residue that comes, because of rejection, and like that residue is something that like I think we run from fairly
that's right.
often.
I think so too. Yeah. I think another element of this that has really just maybe exacerbated the feeling of rejection in recent years has been social media. I think that we have access to being able to compare ourselves with somebody else's journey in a way that, I don't know what other people were doing when I was 10. Like, I don't remember. I was like playing with my Barbies and my friends down the street were playing with their Barbies, like there wasn't that. But now I can see it in my nieces and nephews. And as soon as
Mhm.
they begin to get a phone and they're on social media, it's like 0 to 60 in terms of how they're beginning to think about themselves in relationships to other people. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on how social media has kind of shaped the experience of rejection?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, as you were saying, like increased visibility, right?
Yeah,
So our successes, we tend to put like the best of us on
right.
social media.
Yeah,
So like, the best of us is being broadcasted to a wider audience. It's not just friends and family. where rejection can happen also, but it's also, strangers, it's, professional people that we have professional relationships with. And I think that, this then creates expectation, right? Like we're putting the best of us out there. And if the best of us is not received with like a whole bunch of likes and, people commenting how good it is, or, just like showing a reception of like love and admiration, then, and this is the best of us, and sometimes even like a little extra on there, then what about our actual selves? What about the selves that we don't actually share? And so there's like this, we equate to like being unfollowed, or the ability to quote unquote unfriend someone, which is such a like meaningful term, like unfriend. Yeah, just been thinking about this. But if we have a live event and nobody attends, like we equate this to our value and our worth, and whether or not we should be doing this thing. You talked about comparison. I think that comparison and envy is one of like the biggest places where social media has an impact on our response, or the feeling that we get, the rejection that we get, and seeing others lives, and comparing again the best of us, or even the parts that we don't share, to what we're seeing the best of somebody else, gives really a negative perception of things, of other people's experiences. Cyberbullying and trolling is like at an all-time high on social media. I think that one of the types of rejection is like social rejection. I think, social media and being behind a computer screen allows people to be much more like racist, or transphobic, or sexist, or the worst parts, oppressive, essentially. And so if I allowed myself to read comments, which I don't, if I allowed myself to read comments, and the things that people say about someone who shares an identity, like that, cyberbullying can absolutely begin to be internalized to me as like myself is being rejected.
Yep.
The epitome of online dating is essentially like, do I approve or do I reject this person?
That's right. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, like swiping left or right. I don't know which one is which, but whichever one is the rejecting one, like like what if somebody swipes the approve way and somebody swipes the reject way? Like that's such a hard experience. There's also like matching that happens, and if you are not a good match, this really is a breeding ground for rejection. So these are like the hard ways. I had so many like of the negative that social media had, but I only did the 3. There is a positive though. Like support networks, I think, is also a really great place. So when people are experiencing rejection in their immediate, circles, their families or their friends, I think that people also have the opportunity to, find places where they belong on social media. There are more spaces, more connection, more community that you can find where there is, support, and, maybe not have those experiences of rejection.
Yep. Those are all so good. What struck me was that point you make too, around you're putting out your absolute best, and then you're having to, or you're, experiencing, comparing yourself to everybody else's, right? It's not like, what it brought to mind was Lena Dunham, who was the creator and main actress on the show, The Girls, I think. And her social media presence, I mean, she is just who she is who she is, and she doesn't filter pictures. She's just putting her full self out there. And I just think, wow, I don't take pictures of myself when I'm like laying on the couch at night with like my hair in the bun and like, I'm not posting that content. Right. But that is like a very much a part of like how I look almost every single day, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
you are putting your absolute best out there, and then you're having to like compare yourself to all these other people that you might perceive as like better looking or more successful or have it together more than anybody else. Yeah, it's another form of rejection.
It really is. I think even like there is like the way you show up, right? Like, you and I all often like laugh about like our bottom half, like what we have on that people can't see.
Yes.
Like, I think that has a lot to do with, wanting to, have this like socially accepted like perception. And then even like, do we or do we not wear makeup? I mean, there's just so many conversations that are rooted in wanting approval and acceptance versus rejection, and they're like usually just like pitted against each other. So talk about more about what you think around social media. What's different about how people experience rejection now that might be unique to this period of time where social media is just the thing that we do all day every day?
Yeah, I have some thoughts around like LinkedIn, which is like the main social media account that I use today. I don't really use Facebook or Instagram all that much anymore. I don't even have a TikTok account, thank God. Like, so I just don't need another one in my life. I'm like, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. But LinkedIn is one that I use a lot professionally. And I think that that brings up a lot of rejection, I bet, because you're constantly, it's kind of the way that people, acknowledge professional accomplishments for
Sure.
themselves, which is like so important and so necessary. But I think it also brings up this other piece of feeling like everybody else is like moving forward. And if you're kind of a career oriented type person like I am, then, you're constantly like, how am I measuring up with
Mhm.
how all of these other people are doing, And I was thinking of this particularly in the sense that there have been a lot of layoffs in the kind of startup tech world in the last couple of years. And most of it has nothing to do with the individuals that are being laid off. Almost all of it has to do with, kind of the macroeconomic scenario of a company raising too much money from investors at too high of a valuation. This is like a world that I think and know a lot about and think about a lot. Is that's the reality of it. For most of these startups, you're in a race towards trying to be successful, trying to get your idea off the ground and to a place that it can be a viable, profitable business, and you have to determine how much money you're going to raise, like, and then when you raise that, and if you hire a bunch of people and then it doesn't work out or the sales don't happen as fast as you think that they would, then you're faced with like laying people off. That is like a very real reality that a lot of people have found themselves in the last couple of years. Like, they are kind of the victims of those business decisions that had nothing to do with them, their worth, their creativity, their work ethic, all of those things. But I would think on the receiving end of it, it wouldn't feel that way. It would feel like I wasn't one of the ones that was chosen.
Yeah.
Another one I thought of that I wanted to mention is that I was a member for a little bit of this professional women's group called Chief. And I was really intrigued by the idea at first. And people maybe have seen it on LinkedIn. It's like these it's like a green shirt, I think, green sweatshirt and like green bags. And it's kind of this exclusive group of professional women. And a lot of criticism came out against them, enough to make me want to cancel my membership, which I did. But it was around how can you promote inclusivity in the workplace, and all women deserve the chance to grow their careers and to reach leadership positions. But then your membership is based on only the people that are in the top C-suite positions. There was also a lot of like, I think, racial bias that was involved in the process as well. They got called out a lot for that. Just I didn't experience in any of the peer groups I was a part of enough diversity. So, I think that's another piece of it too. It's like, it's kind of heralded on social media on LinkedIn as like this exclusive group that you want access to. But then when you get into it, it's like, oh man, it's like it exists around exclusivity, right? You know, and like that piece probably makes many, many people feel rejected, like as if they don't have a seat at the table. And I was like, I just don't want to be a part of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it also perpetuates something that's already there. I mean, there already is this consistent experience, which is real and true, that Black and brown women are not represented in, C-suite positions. Yep. And that this is something that is like across the board, that's already experienced, that's already seen. And I think even from my perspective, I was like, oh, great. There is this organization that is calling that out. And that there can be some inclusion and representation in this like wildly successful, organization that, raised money, and that there were investors who were seeing the value of their mission. And then there was, pretty deeply rooted exclusion that was, kind of that Black and brown women were facing. And it didn't actually, no one actually was talking about it until they were. And it's kind of like this, that's interesting. It's interesting that it mirrors what's already happening, but the premise and the platform is this is something different.
Yeah.
I think that's more painful.
It is more painful. And I think it's also like disappointing. Like it could have been so much more. Like the actual need that they were talking about filling is a real need, but then like to do it in a way that doesn't consider all women, that doesn't, think about all level. I remember recommending a number of women where it was like, they just don't meet the qualifications. And it's like, well, like, isn't this the purpose of this, is to like help, so it's unfortunate. I hate to call them out like that, but not really. But let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, because I think that really like plays into this as well. Like, how do you see imposter syndrome like merging with rejection?
Yeah, I feel like, with the topic today, actually every episode, I'm constantly like having to work on myself as I write my notes. I feel like this week and this conversation specifically was, in each question, I was like, I need to work on this. I was like taking notes, like for my therapist. We need to talk about this because I struggle with this, right? So I feel like imposter syndrome and rejection are like right at the like intersection of the things that I constantly am struggling with. So I think that, this is like right up my alley. So I think both of them involve a negative self-perception. That's like, the foundational thing. And they both have a significant impact on a person's self-esteem, their sense of belonging, their worthiness. Like these are like deeply embedded in who a person is, who they believe that they are, and then who they believe they can be. And imposter syndrome and rejection hit right in all of those areas. So we have self-doubt where, I feel like even just the definition of imposter syndrome just speaks right to self-doubt. So imposter syndrome is characterized by a persistent belief that one is not as competent or capable as others perceive them to be. So you have people who are outside of you, who are objectively able to say, I see this value in you. And you're like, nope, I don't believe you. I'm going to believe what I think about me. And I'm not competent. Don't tell me I'm competent, because I'm not. I actually don't believe you. And then there's like the addition that there's a fear of being exposed as a fraud. Like what you see is like, you might find out that actually I'm not what you think that I am. I'm not competent. I'm not good at this thing. And so now I have anxiety mixed in, into this self-doubt. I think that, inferiority comes up, feelings of unworthiness. And so then when rejection happens, which is, again, something that is natural,
Yep.
rejection happens. It is a lived experience for all of us. Like if someone who has imposter syndrome, we're struggling with it, has an idea that they then share, but then that idea isn't used, or someone else has a better idea, which again is natural. The person who's struggling with imposter syndrome can interpret this as confirmation that they're not talented or smart or capable. So it speaks right to what the imposter syndrome actually is telling us, in that thought process. I think also there's this this journey to seek validation. And with imposter syndrome, we're getting the validation, we just don't believe it. Right. And so it's just this constant cycle of dysfunctional thoughts that really keep us situated in this space. Rejection can intensify people's need for validation, because when rejection comes, it can come in the form of criticism or disapproval or exclusion. And so when we're seeking external validation and that doesn't come, or we're actively excluded from something, it then says, yep, you are an imposter. And there's evidence of it right there. I think of fear of failure. So how people ask you sometimes what's your greatest fear? I used to say before therapy, failure. I used to be deeply afraid of failing at something. And the experience of failing says I'm being rejected from this growth or this experience or whatever the case is. And so then the impact of that is to avoid taking risks. So imposter syndrome says I'm not competent, so I can't even reach what I'm trying to get to. I'm not good at this thing that I'm new at and I'm trying. And then there is, the failure, the possibility of failure that then says, nope, I'm not even going to take the risk because, it's not going to be worth it. Perceived incompetence, which I already talked about. There's negative self-talk, harsh inner critic, people who struggle with imposter syndrome, have an inner critic that is speaking loud, and it gets louder when rejection happens, which again happens to all of us in one form or the other. And then there's perceived unworthiness. Unworthiness is this deeply rooted experience of not being good enough. And when you're struggling with imposter syndrome already, you don't feel incompetent and you get rejected, the lack of work, the feeling of being unworthy, it just begins to thrive. It grows just a little bit more with every experience of rejection. So I think that your second question around combating imposter syndrome when facing rejection, I've read this concept a few different times, and I've rejected it until probably the last couple of months. But so there's this notion in Buddhism of nirvana, and nirvana is that you are that it's complete liberation from the suffering of an afflictive mind. So you're kind of free to be able to think about various things. And one of those things is that when you have a thought, that's only one-sided. It's only one possibility. And that there is an equal chance that the complete opposite is true.
I love that.
That's something that is just mind-blowing. But so if you think something, if I believe with every fiber of my being that I'm incompetent or I'm an imposter or this rejection means that I'm unworthy, there's also the possibility that the complete opposite is true. I actually am competent. I actually am worthy. What people see in me might actually be true. It's kind of mind-blowing.
I just typed it because I was I am going to highlight this and put it that there is an equal chance that the opposite is true.
Yeah.
That's profound.
It's it's life-changing.
Yeah.
It's even with imposter syndrome, like I am an imposter. That is my truth, right? Like if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, my truth is that I'm an imposter and I'm not supposed to be here.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite is also, there's an equal chance of the opposite being true also.
Yep. Okay, I have a couple of things. First of all, I could listen to you talk about imposter syndrome all day long. I think you could do a master class on it because you don't talk about it from like a book smart perspective. You are talking about it from personal experience.
Yep.
I know that you have worked through these things, continue to work through, as I think many of us do. Yep. And so it's like, it just, all of the stuff that you said was just like golden. I love that so much. You what?
I'll tell my therapist she's doing a good job.
Yes, A+. Gold star. There's an equal chance that the opposite is true too. Makes me think about the two different therapy techniques. Examine the evidence, like what evidence exists that you can't do this. And then also, I feel like there's one that's something like examine the exception. Like in what, right? Is that what it's called? Examine the exception of just like, find the exception. Is there times that it wasn't the case that you aren't good enough to do this? And oftentimes, like, our mind is just going to like exactly what you said, more validation of the fear that you already experience.
Yes. And when you are searching for the exceptions, you actually find that it's not actually the exception. It probably happens more often that the opposite is true. You're just not focusing on that.
Yep.
So I think that's the point, right? Like you're finding the exception, and there's kind of like this strengths-based perspective of like, okay, so then if you can actually find the exception in your life and see that you were good at this thing this time, then you can connect the times where you were actually good at it, and you find that you were good at it so many more times than you thought. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that this is also like, lending itself to, a conversation about what's good about rejection. So what do you think about the good that can come from rejection?
Yeah. I'm always one that like tries to reframe almost any negative emotion as like, how can I find the good in it? So I think there are a few here. I mean, I think it's good to, I talk about this a lot in Mondays with Motivo, that like I have a tendency to skip over the hard stuff and get to the learning or growth part. And sometimes like too fast. So I think it's like, it is important to kind of sit with the feeling, the hurt, the pain, the uncertainty, the fear, all of those things that come with rejection. But then, as you begin to like kind of think through and talk yourself through it, I think there are ways that you can grow from it. I think of the times that, Motivo has been rejected by, customers or partners or investors. And, those no's were super hard and made me feel like, oh, this isn't going to work at all. But they also were kind of rocket fuel in a sense of like, I was really good at taking whatever their feedback was and incorporating it into like how to make the company better. I think one of the things I struggled with early on too was like separating any form of rejection from my personal worth and value, especially professionally. I think this is harder to do in personal forms of rejection, but professionally, I can remember talking to this one investor once, and I was telling him like, everybody passed on me, like nobody wanted to invest, like I might have even said they rejected me, but I know I said they passed on me. And he was like, let's reframe that. Like they didn't pass on you personally. Yeah. They passed on the opportunity to invest in Motivo at this current stage and size right now for a variety of factors that might have nothing to do. In fact, definitely have nothing to do with who you are personally. And, I think reframing that became like helpful. I think the other piece that I would say for me personally that has come from rejection is like more and more self-acceptance. There was a long time, particularly professionally at Motivo, where I thought everybody was smarter about Motivo than I was. Like if I asked anybody's advice or whatever, and they told me something, I'd be like, they're probably right and I'm probably wrong. But like, I think that as I've grown in, just my acceptance of who I am and what Motivo does and like what I bring to the table and all those kinds of things, it's helped me to be more confident of knowing what's best for the company. And I think that has come from a lot of no's or incorrect. I'm thinking about even our first Digging Deep episode. I got this feedback from this marketing guy who told me that a couple of things. He told me I needed to smile more, that I needed to be more charming, and that I needed to show more executive presence. And I still don't quite know what executive presence is, but I don't think of me when I think of executive presence, to be honest with you. And like, as I thought through that feedback in my head, I was like, I actually like the way that I show up in the world as a professional. I think he's like wrong. And so being able to get to that place of like, and maybe you can do this in any form of rejection, like, maybe they're wrong maybe they got it wrong with you, like, isn't that there an equal chance that the opposite is true?
Exactly. Yeah, there is an equal chance that the opposite is true. And, one person's, what somebody likes, is going to be very different than, somebody else. So it's one person's perspective. I also love your point about, rejection or, a no being rocket fuel. I mean, rocket fuel to me seems like it's so much powerful. It has to be than gasoline, right? Like, if we're talking about making a car go versus a rocket, like, this is much more powerful. And that is actually the transition in even my mind around failure. That, failure actually is what we use to make, get to the right thing. If we are doing something and we get, and we do it right, or we don't fail at it, then we're just going to consistently do it the way that works. But if we fail at something, if we get rejected, then it's, rocket fuel to go to the right thing and find the right thing. I actually, in my last year of college, I thought I wanted to be a speech pathologist, and just know speech pathologists need a lot of science, and I took like the most basic sciences in college.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They need like biology and like
not for me
hard sciences, right? And that's I majored in English, so like earth science or below is what I took because I just that's all I needed. All I needed, right? So I had this grand idea to be a speech pathologist. Spent all my money applying to like 8 of some of the like best speech pathology programs, and received no's from all 8 of them.
I didn't know this.
And I'm talking every single egg that I had, I put in this basket because I was like, why would anybody say no? Well, because you have earth science and you need, you need other sciences for that, right? So you know about the earth, but you actually don't know about like biology and physiology and anatomy was another one you had to take. Didn't take that. So I was obviously devastated, but it was these 8 no's that actually put me on the path that I'm on now to be a therapist, right? Like I, was exposed to social workers and, I was like, oh my gosh, I love social work. I love this notion of helping people and also holding society and all of those things, advocacy. And so I found the right thing by having 8 no's, because if I would have had 1 yes, I would have gone to this program and not had the background to actually excel and succeed in it. So I love this notion of like no's and rejection being rocket fuel. It's amazing.
And then maybe even too, that's like a very powerful story. I had no idea that was something that you went for speech and language pathology. But like that, I wonder, just thinking back in my own life, how many times I was told no that like got me to where I am in terms of like that there was like a better path for me that, wasn't clear at the time.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. I think that, the notion of shifting, knows and how it turned into the right thing
Yep.
is, such a great way to grow.
I love that. Like maybe we always like to like kind of put in a question around how you help clients with this very issue as well. What do you see coming into your office in terms of rejection and self-worth? How do you help your clients navigate?
Yeah, I think that's like at the root of a lot of what my, clients struggle with. I work with, mainly Black and brown women, and, trans and queer populations. So they are well versed in experiences of exclusion and rejection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes with families, sometimes in really close relationships. And so, one of the major things is, I've had to make sure that I'm consistently in my own therapy as well, because I too have some overlap with experiences, similar experiences as my clients. And that can sometimes, if I'm not doing my own work, it can sometimes make my experience bleed into theirs. So it just kind of helps with boundaries that, yes, there can be some similarities, but I have to be just as curious about their experiences to identify what's different. But I also think that, this shift, where we use no's and rejection as rocket fuel to find the right thing and be the right thing that, is good for us, happens over time. So I think it being part of my job to consistently point out the good in people. So when they're hearing that something about them or a decision that they've made is bad or not approved, they have a counter narrative. And I kind of see that as my job, because I truly believe that everyone has the capacity for good. And not just like general good, but to feel good about themselves, to like identify what is like powerful and valuable about them, because I think that everyone has value. So it is my job, even as I'm listening to some of the narratives that they have picked up about who they are, about them being bad, or I being bad parents, or being bad partners, or whatever it is, this bad, pointing out the exceptions like we talked about earlier, like, well, this is an instance where, this is different than what you think of yourself and the belief that you have about yourself. So I think that by challenging those thoughts, every single chance I get, listening for, the moments where it's different than what they believe about themselves or what they've begun to believe about themselves. If they have imposter syndrome, being the person that, is outside of them, challenging, that belief about themselves, highlighting the places where they're worthy. I'm constantly like, making lists, right? Like I'll even write out a list as they're talking, like, not to interrupt. However, this is very valuable about you. Did you know that this was something that was valuable about you? And like really challenging with those questions. I think that is what makes a great difference in helping people when they do go inside and they say like, I experienced this rejection. That means I'm unworthy. Them having a voice, even if it's mine for a while, that says, actually, you are worthy and here's how.
Yep. I love that too, in the sense of like, I always think about that phrase about therapists, providing their clients with a corrective emotional experience where there's almost no place that you're more vulnerable than in a therapist's office. So if you're sharing your deepest hopes and dreams and fears there, and your therapist is responding back with like love and affirmation and, pointing out the strengths that you have, like that does give you that corrective emotional experience that I think can build a lot of confidence and a sense of belonging on all of those things.
Yeah. And for all intents and purposes, like I'm basically a stranger, right? Like over time, we build a relationship where I'm no longer a stranger. But if I'm a stranger who, most clients are coming for us to confirm that there's something wrong with them. but actually I'm a professional stranger that says there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're just struggling. And, here's how you have helped yourself in the past. Here's what's valuable about you that will continue to help you. It really does challenge that notion that, there's something wrong and, they deserve, shame or hard feelings. I really love this next question. Can you share a personal mantra or piece of advice that has helped you navigate the challenges of rejection in your life?
Yes, I have a couple actually. And one that I just thought of too, when you were saying what you said, I borrow it from my husband's therapist, who she always says to him, your worth is not up for a debate today. And that has become a personal mantra of his, of your worth is not up for a debate today. And I think that's a really powerful one. The one I use most often is no feeling is final, from the Rainer Marie Rilke quote. It's like, let everything happen to you. I think it's like terror and beauty, or, but there's no feeling is final. And I like the no feeling is final part of that quote that says, I might be experiencing this right now, but I'm not going to experience it. I'm not going to feel this forever. Another one, and this is a very recent one. I have this cooking playlist that I always share, is to me the greatest cooking playlist of all time. But one of the recent additions that I added to it was the Brian Wilson song Love and Mercy. And, Brian Wilson was one of the, original people in the Beach Boys, kind of like a founding member of the Beach Boys. But this was like a song that he produced later. But like the words of it have become so meaningful to me. About love and mercy, and like directing that to myself, of like just like self-love and mercy for not being perfect, or not knowing what I don't know yet, or any of those things. I think the mercy that you can give to yourself, and then hopefully also extend to others. I also use the song when I'm like mad about something, and how I'm thinking about extending mercy or love to somebody else, but like extending it to myself, I think is a huge piece of, I don't know, something that I say to myself. What about you?
I like that. So earmuffs for children. I couldn't figure out how to reword this, but I just tend to tell myself that rejection is hard as fuck. There is no way around how hard rejection and the feelings that come along with it are. Shame is probably one of, I think I already said this, the hardest emotions that we can grapple with. And shame is often tied to rejection. And so rejection and just like disappointment and, not feeling that you are approved or that you belong. I mean, these are some of the hardest things that we will experience in our life. And to just like sit in that, like, this is hard, and it's going to be hard until it's not. You don't have to grow from it right away. You don't have to be better. You don't have to, remember that the opposite is true right away. In fact, it's just going to be hard. It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. And if you have a chance to talk about it, in its truest, authentic way, go ahead and do that, and just sit in the hard, cry about it, be angry about it, just feel whatever feelings come. And, it will begin to transition whenever it's ready, or whenever you're ready for it to transition. But, the residue of rejection is something that is just going to be with us, and, we'll survive it.
Right. Yes. You know what that makes me think of too? It's just like the validation, the experience of validating a feeling is like, it has to happen before anything else can happen. I remember in my basic skills therapy class, like, they taught us to just validate the feeling. And it's like, as an early therapist, you are so eager to get in there and be like, is this about your father? Or have you thought about this? Different things like that. But it's like, if you don't validate the feeling, then you can't go anywhere else, and even when I'm talking to my friends, like, I'm oftentimes talking to them looking for their advice or their perspective or their feedback. But when they start, which they almost always do, with a validation of like, that sounds really hard, Rachel, then it's like, that's the key that unlocks any other, let's move forward from here, you know?
Exactly. We have to make space for something like rejection. Everybody experiences it. It's hard for, I would say, everybody, but I haven't talked to everybody, but rejection is hard AF.
Yeah.
And therefore we have to sit with that.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I love it. I love it.
This was such a good conversation.
This was really good.
Yeah, it was really good. I think we got to the good, right? We talked about like how hard it is. We also got to the good.
Yeah.
Next week's is also very hard. And I feel like your lack of notes around what it is means that it's a mic drop. It is a mic dropper. So go ahead, tell us.
Yes. Okay. So the topic is going to be the things we use to numb. And I, just to give a brief preview, we were talking about, I was telling Carla that I have noticed that I get into this habit sometimes of having a glass or two of wine at night. And it doesn't serve any purpose for me except to help me kind of have this like, kind of release of nervous system kind of relaxation. And I don't like it because it gives me a lot of other negative symptoms. I don't sleep as well. I'm more groggy the next day. It's a lot of sugar, there are many reasons to not, and I just have been thinking about how that is like, for me, a way that I numb. And I think there's many other ways that people numb. And you made a really good point when we were talking about this, just to say that therapists, oftentimes experience like a lot of stuff in their day. Hearing the stories can be quite intense for people. And some therapists, I would say most therapists probably have ways that they cope with that are healthy and ways that they cope with it that are unhealthy. So we're going to talk about that, all those things.
We are. So there's another doozy of a topic that we're super excited to dig into. I do want to quickly mention, as I always do, that we are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We have this is our 11th episode or 12th, somewhere around there. So we have a good little library. Always open to your feedback. And the video you can find on YouTube, which I am really excited about being on video. We'll talk about that a little bit later around why. And then also we are live each week on LinkedIn. You can follow myself, Rachel, and the Motivo Health page to register for our weekly live events.
I love it. Always love this time with you. It's my favorite thing.
It's the highlight of the week.
Yeah.
So appreciative of you.
All right. Yeah, I'm so appreciative of you. All right. We'll see everybody next week. Go listen to the Love and Mercy song if you want to. Brian Wilson. So good.
Good ending. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.